Hey guys, go ahead and get out your note sheet for inequalities. So we're going to start with our definition of an inequality, and it's a mathematical sentence that compares quantities that are not equal. If you actually think of the word inequality, it's like saying unequal or not equal. And what that means is that you're not going to have exactly one answer. Sides aren't equal. You're going to have multiple answers for inequalities. Go ahead and pause the video here in a second and copy down the chart that you see here. This chart will explain what each of these symbols looks like and how they're read. And also, you're going to want to copy down what's down below, which open dot would be used when graphing less than or greater than, because an open dot means that number is not included. And then you'll use a closed dot for greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. The shading or the closed dot means that you're also including the number at that point on the number line and everything else either to the left or to the right. So pause the video and copy this chart into your notes. Here's a quick practice question just to pick out which inequality would have a closed dot on the number line. Go ahead and pause it, pick your answer, and then press play. And again, that closed dot means that you're going to include that answer, so we should have had option 3 for this one. Alright, so we're going to practice rating inequalities based off of these statements. There's no solving here. This is just understanding how to write the inequality based off of what you read. So if you want to pause this and try them on your own and then press play and check and see what you got, then go ahead. Okay, so for the first one, it says the DVD costs more than, so more than means that greater than symbol, so I'm just going to use D for DVD, and then more than 15 should be D is greater than 15. A dog weighs less than 50, again, I'm going to use D for dog, and then less than is pretty obvious, but would show a less than sign 50. The height requirement is at least. At least means it has to be 52 or taller. If you think of roller coasters, you're not allowed to go on them until you're a specific height, but you can also be taller than that height. So we're going to call it the height requirement at least, meaning you have to be greater than or equal to 52. And then the speed limit is at most 40, which means you don't want to go over 40, but you can go under or exactly 40. So S less than or equal to 40. Okay, so here's another look at inequalities. This is determining the truth of an inequality, and basically they give you a statement and they give you a value for the variable, and you need to plug it in and state whether it's true or false. So you can pause the video and try these. And again, all you're going to do is plug in the variable for each of these, solve it, and then determine if that inequality makes a true statement or not. So go ahead and pause it and try these two out. And by the way, this should say x equals, not p, for number 2. I apologize about that. X equals 40. Okay, so the left side should have been negative 2 plus 8, which would be 6, and 6 is greater than 7. You're determining if that's true or not. That's definitely not true, so this would be false for number 1. And number 2, this would be 40 minus 42, which would end up giving you negative 2. So the statement reads negative 2 is less than or equal to negative 2. Because negative 2 is equal to negative 2, you would say true. So hopefully you were able to get those. Go ahead and try these 4 problems here where you're going to do the same thing. You're going to state yes or no or true or false. If each of these answers does work, you can pause the video, and when you're ready to check them, go ahead and press play to see what you get. So here's the answers for each of these. Hopefully you were able to get them. Number 1, true, 2, false, 3, true, and 4, true. And if you need to check your answers, I have the 4 answers here that you can take a look at. Okay, the next thing you need to get into your notes is the steps for graphing inequalities. There's 4 steps. You're going to want to pause the video and write these out so that you can make sure you understand how you would shade in on a number line inequalities. So go ahead and pause it and copy these steps down. So here's a look at graphing an inequality, and if you take a look at what we have x is less than 3, and you've got an open circle at 3 because you're saying that x is only the numbers shaded, which are less than 3. The open circle, being that you can see where 3 is, means that 3 does not work, but anything less than 3 works. So open circle and less than shades to the left. So here's example number 2, graph y is greater than or equal to negative 5/4. So since we have that or equal to symbol, we're going to draw a closed dot, and then we're going to be shading to the right above negative 5/4. Something to keep in mind with this one, because negative 5/4 is a fraction, it's easier for you to actually graph decimals. Mostly everything else we do, we're going to keep fractions. So when you convert negative 5/4 to the decimal, it's just negative 1.25, which is 1 1/4 away to the left. So you want to just get as close as you can on a number line. So it should look something like that. Go ahead and pause the video and try this one. You're looking for the graph of 7 is less than or equal to m, or from m's perspective, m is greater than or equal to 7. Pause it and then press play when you're ready to check. Correct answer should have been number 4. What I like to look at for these ones is process of elimination. If you know it's a greater than or equal to, you're going to have a closed dot, so you can get rid of options 1 and 2. And now you're just focusing on, well, am I shading to the right or to the left? And you always have to read from m's perspective. So m is greater than or equal to would be 4. If you turn your note sheet over to the back side, we're going to take a quick peek at 3-2 and 3-3, solving one-step inequalities. So the steps for solving all inequalities are already on your paper, and notice that they are pretty much identical to equations: distribute, combine like terms, get variables on the same side, solve the inequality, and then graphing it, that's if needed, and then checking your solution for your inequality. So section 3.2 is using addition or subtraction to solve. So we've got x plus negative 14 is less than 16. If we're going to solve, there's no distributive or like terms. This is a basic one step. So the first thing here is to understand what sign really truly goes with this. So you have x plus negative 14. You don't want those two signs. It confuses people. So you're either deciding is that supposed to be a plus 14 or a minus. And because adding a negative is really subtracting, if you write that as minus 14, it's easier to see that you're going to have to add to solve this, and we get x is less than 30. So to do your checks for inequalities, you actually have two things that you can check. You can check if 30 is the right number, and then if less than is the right symbol. So I'm going to check if 30 is the right number first, and if I plug exactly 30 in, it's going to act like an equation, which means the sides should be equal. So 30 plus negative 14 is 16, and 16 equals 16. So I now know 30 is the right number. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick something, since my answer says that x is only things that are less than 30. I'm going to pick a number less than 30, like 0. And then what that means is that I should get something to match that original inequality, which is the left side is less than the right. And I get negative 14 is less than 16, so I also know that this less than was the correct symbol for my answer, and I'm good to go. Example 2, y plus 21, you're going to subtract 21 from both sides, and you're going to get y is greater than or equal to negative 14. So again, when you go to do your checks for this, we can check negative 14 first, and that should make the sides equal, and they are. And then we're going to pick something greater than negative 14. Well, again, 0 is an easy go-to. 0 is definitely bigger than negative 14. And I'm going to check if the original inequality is true now. And that states that 21 is greater than or equal to 7, which is true. So I know that everything in my answer is correct. All right, so we're going to move straight into 3.3, which is looking at solving inequalities one step by using multiplication or division this time. So the steps are exactly the same. There's just one thing that you're going to have to pay attention to, and it's really the special rule. So we're going to take a look at that first. So you might remember from last year this special rule, but it states that anytime you are solving an inequality that requires you to multiply or divide, and I added this in, so I want you to add it on your note sheet, but multiply or divide both sides of the inequality by a negative number, you must change the direction of the inequality symbol. So I have a hint here, and this hint is to look at the coefficient, and I added when it's on one side, and that means one side of the inequality. And if that is negative, then you'll have to flip your symbol. So when you have variables on both sides, this wouldn't be something you look for, but once your variables are all on one side, if you have a negative coefficient, then yes, you're going to end up flipping your sign when you're solving. So the example at the bottom is basically showing you why. If you were to solve this inequality, you would divide by negative 3. And if you kept as is, you would keep x is greater than negative 3. So if we pick something bigger than negative 3, like 0, or in this case I picked negative 2, what that ends up saying is that 6 is greater than 9. And if you think about it, that's not true. 6 is not greater than 9. But what makes that true is if the inequality symbol was the other way, because 6 is less than 9. So we see that those checks aren't going to work when you don't flip the sign, when you have to multiply or divide by a negative when solving. Okay, so I'm just going to show another reason why you end up having to flip. So I solved negative 2x is greater than 10 by dividing by negative 2 and flipping your sign here in the first one, and we get x is less than negative 5. Another reason why you would have to do this is because technically I could have avoided that negative coefficient by looking at the problem and saying, well, instead let me add 2x to both sides, which you're allowed to do because of that addition property of equality. We would call this one inequality since it's equation or an inequality. And then we would have to move 10 to the other side so we can solve. So then we have 2x is less than negative 10, and then we would divide by 2, and we would have, from x's perspective, x is less than negative 5. So these answers mean the same thing, and on the left side, if I did not flip my inequality symbol, those would not match each other, which is another reason why it's showing you would have to flip whenever you have to divide or multiply by a negative. So you've got some examples at the bottom if you want to try them and then check on the video and see how you did. Make sure you fix any if you get them wrong. We're going to take a look at example 1. So we're going to get rid of divided by 3 by multiplying by 3. What you're multiplying both sides by is a positive 3, so we don't flip. I don't care if 10's negative, that's not what I'm multiplying by. And your final answer is just x is less than negative 30. On your number line, how you would draw that, whoops, that's a negative 31, would be an open circle because we're not including negative 30 as an answer, just anything smaller, so we would shade to the left towards negative 31 and anything in that direction. Okay, 2, we're going to get rid of that negative 6 by multiplying both sides by negative 6. Since I clearly see both sides being multiplied by a negative, I'm going to go ahead and flip my inequality sign, and I'm going to get negative 78 for my answer. So x is anything less than negative 78, but not negative 78. So again, an open circle, and less than we would shade to the left. So here's example 3. You can go ahead and solve it, and then there's multiple choice for which graph you think it is, and you can just graph it on your paper as well. But we should be getting rid of divided by negative 4 by multiplying by negative 4. Again, I'm multiplying by both sides by a negative, so I flip, and my answer should be k is less than negative 4. Less than's an open circle, shaded to the left, so that should be option 1. Number 4, you're going to go ahead and divide both sides by negative 3, which will flip your inequality symbol, so we get w is less than negative 9. And number 5, you're going to multiply both sides by negative 4, which will flip your inequality, so we turn to greater than or equal to. And this is a negative fraction times another negative, and I can actually reduce my 2 and my 4, and I end up with 6. The graphs of these for number 4 should be an open circle at negative 9, shaded to the left, so towards negative 10. And then number 5, you should have a closed dot this time at 6, and we're anything greater than 6, so we're going to shade to the right towards 7. Okay, and then example 6 says when solving, will you switch your inequality symbol? So if you take a look at this one really quick, you can pick your answer, and then we'll go ahead and solve it next. Okay, you should have picked yes, and I know that when you get rid of 4, that doesn't have a negative, but if you look above it, there's a negative with the a, so we're going to have to get rid of that, which means we're going to have to divide by a negative at some point, and that would flip it. So we're going to go ahead and actually solve this one. So I could multiply by 4 first, and that's going to give me negative a is less than 24, nothing flips yet. But if I put my 1 here, I'm going to divide by a negative 1, and then I'm going to need to flip in order for this to work. And so a is greater than negative 24, would be an open circle, and I'm shading to the right towards bigger numbers on my number line. So that's it for these notes. Hopefully you remembered that rule for inequalities, and we will practice more with it next class and do multiple step inequalities.